Hey guys, Valky here, and with the Headhunt event dropping in 2 days of this video's making, I just want to make a guide for how to get your free Moonlight 5 stars since they're pretty rare, and here's a tier list for the best ones to choose for your playstyle. As ML5 heroes are very PvP focused, since I have played top 100 in every PvP game mode for the past few years, I wanted to give my experiences and create some valuable insight. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Your objective will be to recruit one ML5 hero out of this entire pool. The currency needed to participate will be given to you upon completion of your daily and weekly missions. With the weekly being worth the most points. So if you're watching this within 24 hours, maybe even 36 hours of the video's release, do not claim your weeklies at all until the event starts on Wednesday or Thursday your time this week. Once the event opens, you'll be able to unlock heroes on a board. They will come randomly and there will be repeats, but you should be able to re-roll the repeating ones, and if you hit the one you want, you can just claim it early, and afterwards, the only thing you will be unlocking is levels of the shop. And speaking of the shop, when you unlock your hero, and the shop levels, you should be able to unlock a shop where you can just claim extra goodies from a shop. And you'll see here, there's a whole bunch of things ranging from charms, gears, Molagoras, all that, it's just stuff to help you out. And it's pretty easy to do. All it takes is dailies, weeklies, and a little bit of energy on the side. So that out the way, let's take a look at the tier list. And as tier lists go, the units that are higher will be the better units, and within the same tier, I've taken the time to organize units from left to right, so this applies across the entire list. We'll go over the tier list first, then I'll go over some of the standout characters in those tiers, and I'll also show my own stat line up on screen to give you a general idea of how they're geared at the highest competitive level. But always remember, you don't need to have my stats if you're not playing at the highest level. If you have like 80% of my stats, you should be able to comfortably play for champion rank. Just climbing any higher than that will require you to put a little bit of effort in. So to start us off, we have S tier, the must-haves of the game. Mediator Choux will be the first character here, lovingly known in the community as Handguy. He's still at the top. If you're a new player and you have no idea what you're looking at, let me do you a favor. Just take him, close the video, don't think about it anymore. It's really just that easy. He will make your time with the game so much easier and streamline your PvP progression. He's a unit that can cleanse debuffs with a passive ability that cleanses his own debuffs first. So in a match, I visualize him as like this guy that's holding up an umbrella for all the lovely ladies in your team and all the other units, and the umbrella will protect you against nasty debuffs like stun, seals, bombs, defense breaks, and on top of all of that, he provides immunity buff, barrier, but most importantly, attack up for your entire team. It's also really easy to build, since he only needs to be tanky, he doesn't need effect resist for his cleanse abilities, and he maybe built a little bit faster, really up to you. And the coolest part is he doesn't really take any brain power to use. He's really self-explanatory, and there's not very much room to be creative with him. Most of the time, 90% of the time, press his buttons, use his cooldowns when they're up, and you should just win. While I don't think he's the strongest unit of this tier, he's ease of gearing and ease of use, and his well-rounded kit, honestly, for me, makes him a first ballot candidate for any new players in the top tier of characters in Epic 7, especially when it comes to PvP. Second unit in must-have is who I realistically think is the strongest, CLilias, who has been the #1 character in the game for 2 whole years, her entire release window. And the reason why I put her one spot behind Handguy is she's honestly a bit hard to use sometimes. Now, there are a lot of units in the 2 years that she's been out designed specifically to counter her, like Bunny Dominion and Ocean Breeze Luluka. On top of needing a little bit of speed gear, you will need to kind of learn how to actually play her, when's the right time to use her cooldowns, when's time to just like hold her cooldowns and use her S1, which is also powerful. It pulls a dual attack from any of your units. Conqueror Lilias also has insane base speed at 122, meaning not only does she enable a lot of aggressive action should you want to play very proactively, the speed and her attack down debuff will also be good versus a lot of aggressive teams. So if you sneak her in front of an aggressive draft, they have to fight through attack down, which is usually a death sentence. Biggest draw with her is still the vigor buff that she can provide for the team. 30% attack and 30% defense cannot be stripped. That is huge. And that means she's really the best support and can be used aggressively and defensively. The third unit in the must-have tier right now is Briar, which Iseria. This is one of the few times she's in the absolute top tier, and I would say this is exclusively due to her passive. Her passive gives her additional hit chance, which beats evasion comps. It blocks revives, which also check Maid Chloe or Destina style revive compositions. But more importantly in this meta, her ultimate strips all buffs and blocks incoming buffs. Also makes her a hard counter to buff-based comps. So with one unit, you have a hard counter to 3 team archetypes, and to me, that's why she's an S tier right now. You can build her multiple ways as well, like me, full damage, or she could be built with effectiveness as a debuffer, and if you're really deep in the RTA sauce, she's even playable as a tank. But that's for another video. And this is something you'll notice with PvP in general. This is very, very important to keep note of. The more places a unit can be good at, not just okay, be good at, the better they usually are. All of the S tier units are great both aggressively and defensively. LRKrau is the only tank to be in top tier. Now, if you were paying attention to what I was just saying, you'll probably think he does something aggressive for a tank. And you would absolutely be right, because LRKrau has a true damage AoE ultimate where he rams his bike into his opponent's team, and it does a lot of damage, and it scales over the course of a game. So if you can keep him alive, he'll do a lot more. But the most important thing with that is, as a tank, you can play him with very, very aggressive composition. So if your opponent doesn't, respect the fact that you're bringing a lot of AoE true damage, you can just speed up and take out your opponent with cleave characters. And having this ability to pivot is something I value a lot. His passive also provides barriers versus AoEs, which you can find quite commonly in the current meta with a few top tier DPSs like ML Landy, Lone Crescent Bellona, and all that good stuff. Oh yeah, Yufine as well, how can I forget her? And when you play him, taking attacks, especially AoEs in particular, reduces the cooldown of the ultimate, and it makes him a very high pressure tempo DPS and a tank rolled up into one. Last character in S tier is Zio. Zio has the equivalent of the first turn he takes, he gets 20% speed. And I'm sure I don't have to explain to you guys the value of going first guaranteed in a turn-based game. With the extra speed, he can go ahead of any opener, and he has a silence on his ultimate. And that silence in turn can not only be used to stop cleavers, but also enable cleave compositions with Jacko, Requiem, RRoana. So you can play him both ways without needing to be extremely fast. You can play him as a debuffer with high effectiveness just to guarantee the silence, or you can drop all your effectiveness and play him slower like just honestly a DPS character, since he does a lot of damage and he doesn't take a lot on his own. And that is the S tier. I think these 5 are the most important 5 characters you could potentially take with the Headhunt. But following that, we have the A tier, which are characters that will have some weaknesses, but overall remain some of the best units in the game. So starting here, we'll only go over some of the most notable characters. First one is Spectre Tenebria, who used to be the best undisputed DPS in the game. She has a stealth passive, which instantly makes her a hard counter to every single target nuker in the game. She has flexible ways to be built, both with damage, or you can build her really tanky and bait AoE compositions, since her passive also gives her stacking attack and defense. And her soul burn just gives her an extra turn to do more damage. So it's extremely flexible. You can get really creative playing her. But following the release of strong AoE characters like Navy Captain Landy and Abyssal Yufine, her position has just become kind of unstable as of late. She no longer has the safety since the units, like the ones I named, can punish her and are a lot harder to punish back. Martial Artist Ken, he used to be at the bottom tier, but following his rework, he's kind of risen up as this menace versus a lot of the meta DPS characters we have, like, oh man, you're gonna hear me say this a lot, Navy Captain Landy, Abyssal Yufine. He has a pretty good matchup versus both of them because he punishes characters who crit. He's relying purely on counterattack just because that's his playstyle, so he's not very proactive. He's effective if you don't mind just, letting your opponent ram their head into a wall and kind of watching the wall punch them back. So not my style, but I will recognize he is extremely strong after the buff. One extra thing I will add about him is that he's both easy and hard to gear at the same time. He needs 0 speed and 0 crit chance, which is good because those are some of the harder stats to roll, but at the same time, not a lot of people will have gear that has 0 crit chance, 0 speed, and has a lot of effect resistance, right? Which is something he kind of needs. He wants to remain free of debuffs so he can stay active without it being his turn. So he's a very awkward character. You're gonna have to put a lot of effort towards him. Maid Chloe is another character that's how do I say this? She's like the main character of her own show. If you play her, your entire account is built to play her. She demands to be the main character of your account, should you play that way. And the main reason is because her passive gives the entire team effect resist. Her kit also has healing, attack buff, and a revive, which honestly is a pretty complete kit. But because she gives the extra effect resist, as a standalone support for a normal composition, she's not any better than Handguy. Handguy does a little bit more, but if you play the effect resist playstyle, right, you just build a little bit on every character and you include Maid Chloe, you include Crimson Armament, and boom, every single character should be able to shrug off a lot of casual debuffs. So if you're one of those guys that go, oh no, I have no speed gear is cringe, I can't ever go fast. If you have that little hopes in your account being able to take the proactive, right? You can probably all in on playing a Maid Chloe account. It's honestly not a bad option. Top players like KHM and streamers like Carve6, I think, are all great examples of people who play a lot of Maid Chloe as the main way their account is facilitated. After Maid Chloe, Solitaria, I think, is in as good of a spot as she's ever been. Even though there's been units like Edward Elric released that's meant to counter her, an equal amount of focus characters, which she beats, by the way. She locks away all focus. Remnant Violet, Green Violet, all die to her, right? And Ocean Breeze Luluka has been a very strong meta support that gets absolutely bodied by Solitaria since she blocks the truck. Really important unit, but mostly for RTA. Ambitious Tywin is the second tank on this tier list, and I would say he's the MVP for E7WC winner Marguerite, since there are a lot of debuffs in the meta at the moment, and Ambitious Tywin really abuses team that can't put up immunity buffs. His value will always fluctuate based on the amount of immunities and debuffs at the moment right now, and I would say debuffs are at an all-time high and immunity is at an all-time low. And on top of that, just very nice to have a tank that has other utilities, like being able to cleanse, being able to also debuff, all rolled up into one. Very nice. Lionheart Sirmia is just a hard counter to a lot of counter compositions, right? She goes crazy, hits back. Remnant Violet is, he dodges, and then he wins the game. But the moment he gets hit, looks terrible. A Ravi, is a juggernaut. She is the quintessential juggernaut. She will never die. She will hit back hard. Doesn't do a lot more than that. Her signature ability is if she gets a big kill with her ultimate, which ramps up in damage as death rack up in the game, she actually revives one of her allies, being her signature ability. Pirate Captain Flan is a bomb-based DPS. The moment your opponents do not go fast and they don't provide like immunity for their team, you drop her, she will win you the game. And Strays is just a tank buster. He will fully defense penetrate the highest HP unit in the game. Like, this is the quickest way I can put for you what the rest of these units do. They've been as strong as they've ever been, and they're, in general, just very good, consistent units. Now, coming into the B tier. Leading off with the tier is Lone Crescent Bellona. She's in an interesting spot because the moment this event goes live, she'll actually be receiving a buff for whatever reason. Don't ask me, right? Right now, her value is also at an all-time high because she's really good into units like Senya, Spectre Tenebria, and Navy Captain Landy. Once again, a lot of units are kind of changing in power levels because who they're good versus. And if you watched E7WC, there's a player called Winterwish who uses her as his main character, and he ended up finishing 3rd, so you know she's one of the better characters in the game, and she's about to get buffed, and that's how you know she's going to be good. The way she's played is she's tanky, her team gets hit, and I think after the buff 5 times or so, she'll bounce back a wave of AoE attacks. She's kind of like a standard DPS bruiser with a counterattack character rolled up into one. Little Queen Charlotte is actually a character that I think a lot of people have been disrespecting a little bit. I do think, compared to a unit that's very similar to her, Savior Aiden, which is a free unit, she's not as easy to use, but she packs a much harder punch when you're looking to take out meta units like Abyssal Yufine, Martial Artist Ken, and Shadow Knight Pillas, which is the flavor of the month of November 2023 when this video is coming out. Really popular hero, 3-star dark specialty change unit. Again, Little Queen Charlotte will hit these units much harder at the cost of being slightly harder to play. Architect Laika coming up next is a character that's kind of fell down a tier. Every other character we talked about is on the up and up. Architect Laika is on a downturn. Mostly just because there are characters that can soft counter her. Think about it this way. If a target has target debuff, Architect Laika will just beam them. That's her specialty. She can soul burn her own combo and set up to blow up one unit, and if you have composition that enables more target debuffs, she'll just do more damage. She's a setup unit. So the problem with her is there are more units that can beat her, like Abyssal Yufine, Ocean Breeze Luluka. So overall, she's a lot harder to play into popular units. So again, because the meta is what it is, she's kind of on the downturn. In Arena and GVG, if you can set up a lot of target debuffs, I think she could be pretty fun to play. And in RTA, you mostly use her to trade 1-for-1 with a lot of extra damage that she can also throw out in that big ultimate AoE. Faithless Lidica has fell off pretty hard after Payra became meta, but now that Payra is also falling off, she's kind of getting better. Faithless Lidica, her biggest ability is the fact that she can reset one character to their maximum cooldown, which works wonders versus slower characters that are really cooldown reliant with no effect resist. Good examples being Handguy, Briar Witch Iseria, Ambitious Tywin could all be good targets for Faithless Lidica. And my personal favorite and why I think she's really good right now, very underrated, she can fully reset Abyssal Yufine. When that happens, Abyssal Yufine, who's a character that's usually not very fast, for 5 turns cannot use her ultimate even if she has full fighting spirit, and I just think that's a really funny interaction. Full fighting spirit, and she just blue balls, that's hell. She just can't go into traumatized. Very underrated unit right now. Operator Sigrid, also on the up and up. Especially because the meta has slowed down. Her specialty is once she's set up with like an attack buff, she can one-shot units that are hiding behind barriers. Usually, characters that check a single niche aren't that good. But right now, 1, barriers are everywhere in the meta with units like Ruele, Handguy, Bunny Dominion, and 2, there are a lot of characters now that give barriers passively. Meaning they can't hold the cooldowns on their barriers to try to outplay your Operator Sigrid and fish her out of Guiding Light stealth. So beating units like LRKrau, Karina, Senya. It gives you the initiative to set up these combos to quickly dispatch your opponents. So maybe a little bias on my part, right? I really like to play proactive and do a lot of damage and outplay people, and I really value the agency in being able to set up these combos, and I think that's something that's really good and underrated. Death Dealer Ray is a really weird one. For me, I think he's about the middle of the pack when it comes to ML5s in terms of power level. His thing is he applies the Venom debuff a lot, and he lets his team do that with him. And after the Venom detonates, they cannot heal back from that, which is great. It really beats down tanky compositions that rely a lot on healing. But here's the part why he's weird. The day that Headhunt is going live, he will also be receiving a buff, same as Lone Crescent Bellona, meaning he either stays the same power level or he's about to become a whole tier stronger. So if you like that death by 1,000 cuts playstyle that he's all about, I think that's probably a unit you want to be on the lookout for. Since like Headhunt is not a unit where you try to get a unit the first day, you could definitely keep them on your board and keep an eye out if you're not in a hurry to pick up your character. Now, out of the rest of these, I think they've always been very consistent and B tier. Bellion specifically beats mages who uses souls. Designer Lilibet beats Briar, which is Iseria, and she's also fairly good against Fumir right now, which is a new character that's bringing a lot of terror. Sylvan Sage Vivian is a DPS that's kind of there to beat Spectre Tenebria and a lot of units that like to hide behind stealth. Fallen Cecilia, a lot of people are putting really low on their list, but she's the quintessential tank. If you just need a tank and you already have the better tanks in the game, no reason not to pick up Fallen Cecilia. I think she works. It's just units, especially Ruele, who is a free unit, kind of does her job but better right now, which is a shame. But she's been so good for so long, absolutely no reason to not take her if you're at this point of the list and you're missing other units. Spirit Eye Celine is the old ML Ken. She used to be a better ML Ken, but after the buff, I think ML Ken is better now. You could play her with Soulburn combos, but that's her niche right now. She's a slightly worse ML Ken. Dark Corvus is like a unstoppable train, but the train goes at like 2 centimeters per year. He's really, really slow, but when you ramp up his big long cooldown, one soul burn, you can one-shot any unit in the game. It's very satisfying, very good in Guild War, but for Arena and RTA, it's a little bit slow. So if you don't mind being slow, he's a good character. Sage Ballin Sazan is a debuff unit. He's a control unit that's used to play into Cleave. Very simple. Now, going into the C tier, these are kind of niche units, and I would say the main thing with them is a lot of characters are maybe just slightly more valuable. If you have every character above this point, I would say you just pick the one you like or the one that's most far to the left, right? Archdemon is the first one. Her gimmick is she's a bruiser that can seal on her auto attacks. She's pretty hard to use right now due to immunity kind of being really popular in the meta. That's a big one, but she's a boss character, and as boss characters go, I think they always have their place. Ruele of Light is another character that I think has way too much disrespect thrown her way. Due to her ultimate to fully revive one character to full health and give them invincibility, she's what we call a +1 priority kill, meaning that any single target nuker compositions will have to take her out first before their intended target. And that makes her ideal in the current meta, where there's a lot of characters like Savior Aiden, Infernal Kawazu, etc. There are a lot of single target units right now. The moment they come out, Ruele basically needs to go first, right? And like, think about if somebody picks an LQC versus your martial artist Ken, right? LQC smashes dark characters, but you have one character they have to take out before the ML Ken. Suddenly, Ruele, a light character, is now a hard counter to LQC. Like, that is huge in this meta. Commander Pavel is a cleave DPS. You set him up by having 2 critical hits on your opening turn, and he goes sicko mode. He gives himself attack up, drops an AoE, pushes himself 50 CR, and it gives him the perfect window to massively nuke any target that's still alive. He's extremely strong, but also hard to play since he requires like 2 turns worth of setup. And in the meta at the moment, he's just too slow. The meta is too slow, so it doesn't pay you off for setting him up for success. You can still play him, but opting to play a style that's not favored in the meta, that will be a choice you make. Now, RRoana is probably going to be my pick. Out of all the characters, this is like, I own every character above her on the tier list, so I'm probably just going to pick her up. And her thing is that her gimmick is she's as fast as the fastest character on your team. But because of that, she's a cleave character that doesn't really do a whole lot of damage. She has little gimmicks like skill cooldown resets, which could be useful. But overall, she just doesn't really do enough. She does have a cool gimmick, but outside of that, she's okay, you know? And the rest of C tier, Closer Charles, Top Model Luluka, Astromancer Elena, these are just characters that are kind of okay. They're cleave characters. Charles and Luluka specifically are openers, but they're not the fastest, so they're not very popular right now. Astromancer Elena is a DPS. She goes kind of middle of the pack when it comes to damage. DJ Bazaar kind of has a similar issue. His base stats are a little too weak. So in the current meta where things are very slow, he just doesn't feel great to play. Even though there are a lot of barriers, you don't get enough value with him. You know, his base stats are really squishy, so he kind of gets dropped out early in a long fight, and you just don't feel his impact. Twisted Idol and Kayron is a character that he's all about counterattacking. He starts out with counter stands, and when your enemy plays the game enough, he throws back this big claw, and it does a lot of fixed damage. The damage is good, don't get me wrong, but with the way he is, he's just a little too stat hungry. He doesn't get enough things in his kit going for him to be good. So it's kind of a shame. And in D tier, just know, you can get these units either really easily from Moonlight Connections, or there's a unit that just does their job better. Arbiter Vildred, Blood Moon Haste, Judge Kisei, Silverblade Araminta, and Specimen Says. Really no need to pick them up. Arbiter Vildred you could consider because a lot of people, especially on the casual side, really likes the fact that he can clear story mode super fast, but you do the same thing with, like, Free Spiriteria. Like, I hate to say it, he's not that much better than her, right? Just my 2 cents. And lastly, in the 2 new tier, you just can't pick them because they're too new. Although I have heard you can pick Urban Shadow Choux, I don't know if that's the case. So let's just throw them up on the board based on how strong I think they are. If Urban Shadow Choux can be picked, by the way, I would instantly take her over RRoana. She's just better. But Navy Captain Landy going up first is easily the best character in the game right now, as of the video's release. There is no argument there. People who don't agree that she's the strongest character, I can safely say, either doesn't play the game or they're trolling. There's so much going on with her skill kit. And if I had to really describe it in an analogy, well, I would say she's a slow-moving fortress with guns firing out of every single side, and when she's charged up, she summons a giant space laser, and she beams the entire enemy team. You win. GG. That's how I visualize her. If you want a full guide and a showcase, feel free to head down to the video I have in the description. I go pretty in-depth there. Abyssal Yufine is almost as good as Landy. Whoops, not Abyssal Yufine. Almost as good as Landy, but I think because she has a little bit more weakness, she's just a teensy bit weaker. She's kind of like a tanky juggernaut, right? She bides her time, and when her fighting spirit bar is full, she goes balls to the walls and rips the opponent teams apart. The analogy I have for her is she's the Cassante of Epic 7. That's it. And Urban Shadow Choux, finally, I would say is a very strong character, and she's mostly good versus slower and tanky compositions right now. As injury characters tend to go, they're just really good for if your opponent is slow and tanky. And if you've been paying attention, I've said in the video multiple times that the meta is just really slow. Meaning Choux is thriving right now. On the surface, she seems like a character that's like Death Dealer Ray, right? Death by 1,000 cuts. But by cut number 5, Choux is like, forget it. And she pulls out a ray gun and she just blasts her opponent. So she's a very cool character. She's decently strong. And yeah, that's every single Moonlight 5-star unit in the game on a tier list, shortly described for your reference. I hope this video was helpful in giving you some of the information you needed to make the right decision for yourself, but also to help you in PvP in general. If you found it helpful, you can always help me back by subscribing to the channel and liking the video. If you have any specific questions, because remember, if you ask me about what unit to pick, I'll just tell you, top to bottom, left to right. It's really simple. But if you have anything specific that you want to ask, like, hey, I see your build is like different that compared to this other YouTuber, like, can you shortly justify that? Like, I'm more than willing to open up that conversation, and if you need to, feel free to go into the description and go into the Discord server. That's where I hang out most days, and there are a lot of high-ranked players there as well. And yeah, that's it from me for today. I hope to see you guys in the next video. I truly do. Honestly, super stoked for it. My editor, Rizky, has been cooking it up for a few days now. But until then, that's all I got for you guys. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you guys later. See ya.